Cartels are now officially in the Pentagon's crosshairs. And it's not just the wall anymore. Trump ordered the kill shot.
I don't think we're going to necessarily ask for a declaration of war. I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country, okay? We're going to kill them.
The United States has just declared war on the cartels, and the border has erupted into a battlefield. In a military operation that shocked the world, U.S. Marines crushed a deadly cartel ambush in a clash unlike anything seen before. Warships moved in, precision strikes lit up the Caribbean, and the cartels suffered devastating losses. But according to top-secret reports, they aren't retreating.
Both Colombia and to Ecuador to show these men were trafficking drugs.
They're rearming, stockpiling drones, anti-aircraft guns, and ex-special forces fighters. The U.S. may have landed a fatal blow, but the next battle won't be decided by firepower alone. The loud war drums. Within hours of taking office, Donald Trump signed Executive Order 157, a decisive move that redefined the U.S. approach to transnational crime.
That new executive order from the president aimed at making it easier for cities. Language of the order from the White House so you can see a little bit of it for yourself.
The order formally designated major Mexican drug cartels.
And bad guy, he's a guy that is making a lot of drugs. We've just, as of today, stopped all payments going to Colombia.
Including the Sinaloa Cartel and CJNG, alongside violent groups like MS-13 and Venezuela's Tren de Aragua, as foreign terrorist organizations and specially designated global terrorists. Fentanyl overdoses, claiming over 100,000 American lives annually, framed the crisis as a form of chemical warfare, and the administration argued these groups required the same force reserved for Al-Qaeda and ISIS. The designation triggered a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and launched an interagency process to classify criminal groups under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Sweeping counterterrorism powers were unlocked, asset freezes, travel bans, and strict prohibitions on any U.S. support, financial or logistical. By March 2025, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control had already targeted cartel-linked businesses, disrupting an estimated $5 to $10 billion in annual financial flows. The order also transformed strategy into action. Mexico's Senate approved a joint training mission pairing the U.S. Army's 7th Special Forces Group with Mexico's elite Naval Marine Corps, formalizing months of quiet coordination. Since then, U.S. and Mexican agencies have conducted at least 18 joint or U.S.-only surveillance flights deep into Mexican territory, with the MQ-9 Reaper drone taking center stage. Armed with Hellfire missiles and capable of carrying the Ninja Bomb, the Reaper can loiter for 40 hours, track targets with laser precision, and even read license plates from miles away. Under expanded intelligence sharing agreements, the DEA gained limited access to CIA-operated drones to locate hidden drug labs in remote mountains and jungles. These missions, once limited, sharply increased in both frequency and scope. The operational push extended to land and sea. By spring 2025, roughly 2,000 U.S. military personnel, including over 140 intelligence specialists from the CIA, NSA, and military intelligence, were deployed along the southern border. Naval power supplemented land operations. The USS Gravely, armed with Tomahawk cruise missiles, patrolled the Gulf Coast in support of the Border Patrol and Coast Guard. Border infrastructure was upgraded with 30-foot steel bollard barriers, anti-climb designs, and integrated sensors that feed real-time alerts to Air National Guard units. Drones and manned aircraft responded instantly to triggers, enabling law enforcement to intercept targets with precision and dramatically reducing illegal crossings while disrupting cartel smuggling routes. The aerial surveillance fleet expanded beyond the Reaper. U-2 spy planes mapped cartel compounds and transit corridors with ultra-long-range cameras. Navy P-8 Poseidons patrolled Pacific and Baja routes favored for cocaine and fentanyl shipments. RC-135 Rivet joint planes intercepted cartel communications, pinpointed leadership hideouts, and fed location data into joint targeting databases. Behind the scenes, U.S. defense planners debated precision strikes against high-value cartel targets inside Mexico. Proposed missions would involve drones, bombers, and special forces to destroy drug labs, warehouses, and command centers. While Mexican officials were briefed, tensions remained high, and Washington made it clear it could act unilaterally if diplomacy stalled. One strategic asset was already positioned: the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. Invisible to most radar, capable of thousands of miles of flight without refueling, and carrying up to 40,000 pounds of precision munitions, the B-2 could penetrate deep into cartel strongholds, destroy fortified bunkers, and vanish before any response. Integration with Navy E-2D Hawkeye radar, satellite feeds, and the Link 16 tactical network ensured real-time situational awareness. At the same time, JDAM bunker-busting munitions could neutralize the most hardened narco facilities. Meanwhile, Congress received classified briefings on invoking the 2001 authorization for use of military force. The same legal framework guided decades of anti-terror operations in the Middle East and Africa. Months of rising tension erupted into open confrontation. On September 15, 2025, U.S. Navy forces launched missile strikes on 3 Venezuelan-flagged boats in the Caribbean. Vessels, Washington said, were ferrying cocaine for the Sinaloa cartel. 17 people were killed, each declared an unlawful combatant. That same day, President Donald Trump announced the operation, calling it a direct strike against narco-terrorists moving cocaine and fentanyl toward the United States. His post on Truth Social included footage of a small ship consumed by flames after an explosion on open water, a message of precision and resolve. The attack was not an isolated event. 2 earlier strikes that month had already destroyed cartel-linked vessels, killing 14 suspected traffickers. The deadliest occurred on September 2nd, when a missile obliterated a boat in the southern Caribbean, killing 11. Each time, U.S. officials defended the actions, arguing the targets operated along known smuggling routes.
We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time, and these came out of Venezuela.
In Washington, administration allies framed the campaign as decisive and necessary. Senator Marco Rubio emphasized that U.S. intelligence had absolute certainty about the targets and insisted such boats needed to be destroyed. The administration portrayed the operations as part of a broader strategy to dismantle trafficking routes by force, one that could soon extend to cartel compounds and drug labs on land. Released footage from the Department of Defense reinforced the message. Small ships sliced through calm waters before erupting into fire and smoke, accompanied by bold warnings flashing across the screen: "Stop selling fentanyl and illegal drugs in America." Experts in international law cautioned that attacking vessels in international waters, killing their crews, may violate global maritime and human rights law. So how does Washington defend its actions? The legal loop. On October 2nd, a Pentagon memo submitted to Congress boldly stated that the United States was engaged in a non-national armed conflict with cartels, officially designated as foreign terrorist organizations. The memo argued that their drug trafficking operations amounted to an armed attack under international law, granting the U.S. military authority to act even without an immediate threat to American personnel, which means that the attack on those 17 individuals in international waters was a lethal strike justified under the same legal framework once used against al-Qaeda after September 11th. A classified Justice Department opinion, revealed by CNN, authorized targeted strikes on a secret list of cartel operatives, a hit list reminiscent of those deployed in Yemen, Pakistan, and Somalia during the War on Terror. The administration equated fentanyl deaths with terrorism, invoking the law of armed conflict to justify indefinite detention, military tribunals, and lethal targeting of combatants anywhere in the world who posed a continuous threat.
The State Department designating several of these groups Tren de Aragua, MS-13, and the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels.
Legal experts were quick to highlight the differences. Unlike al-Qaeda, which had launched direct attacks on American soil, cartels caused harm indirectly through commercial drug networks. Groups like CJNG operated as decentralized networks rather than structured armies, raising questions about whether they qualified as organized armed groups under the Geneva Conventions. Senator Jack Reed decried the designation of armed conflict as an executive overreach that bypassed Congress. At the same time, scholars like Jeffrey S. Korn warned that it blurred the critical line between crime and war. Yet the administration pressed forward. Representative Chip Roy hailed the approach as decisive, framing it as a military response to a war on U.S. streets waged through fentanyl. Meanwhile, more than 4,000 Marines and sailors were deployed across the Caribbean and Latin American waters under the U.S. Southern Command. This was no symbolic maneuver. Amphibious assault ships carried helicopters, MV-22 Ospreys, and landing craft, while F-35B jets patrolled from strategic locations like Puerto Rico, equipped for surveillance, reconnaissance, and covert strikes. Puerto Rico became a logistical hub, positioning U.S. forces along maritime routes long exploited by traffickers moving cocaine and fentanyl precursors from South America through Mexico and into the United States. The mission's objective was clear: disrupt supply chains at their most vulnerable points. Intelligence indicated that precursors sourced from China were shipped to Mexican cartels like Sinaloa and CJNG, processed in clandestine labs, and smuggled via land and coastal routes. Every strike, every surveillance run, aimed to choke the flow before it reached American streets. As naval and aerial operations intensified in the Caribbean, a parallel and equally consequential drama unfolded on Mexican soil. President Claudia Sheinbaum faced mounting pressure from Washington, and her response would determine whether this conflict remained contained or erupted into a confrontation with unpredictable consequences. Internal conflict. Mexico's response to the Trump administration's hardline cartel policy was fraught with contradiction and political calculation, publicly harsh but quietly cooperative.
And all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades.
President Claudia Sheinbaum flatly rejected what she called a violation of Mexican sovereignty, refusing a October 1st U.S. request for troop access and insisting that American forces would not set foot on Mexican soil. At the same time, Mexican officials warned of retaliatory tariffs and temporary border closures, and they briefly halted joint raids in protest of U.S. strikes in international waters. Beneath the public defiance, however, intense pressure from Washington, including threats of damaging economic measures, produced tangible cooperation. Sheinbaum's government extradited more than 50 alleged cartel figures to the United States and deployed thousands of troops to confront organized crime. Those security moves produced thousands of arrests and massive drug seizures across 2025. At the same time, Washington framed the crisis in bold terms, declaring that the territory south of the border was effectively controlled by cartels that posed a grave threat to U.S. national security. The core question driving every strategic decision was simple and chilling. How would heavily armed paramilitary cartels respond to open military pressure directed at their networks and leaders?
Drugs coming into the United States goes generally through Mexico. He better watch it or we'll take very serious action against him and his country.
Could they invade America and attack? To answer that, it helps to understand the cartel's transformation, how they evolved from smuggling groups into militarized organizations. This shift accelerated in the early 2000s with the rise of Los Zetas, originally the Gulf Cartel's paramilitary enforcement arm. Their creation marked a turning point. Cartels began adopting military tactics, chain-of-command hierarchies, and battlefield discipline. Trained by elite forces in places like Fort Bragg, these men imported the structure and efficiency of modern armies. They introduced specialized units for enforcement, logistics, intelligence, and propaganda, turning the cartels from loosely organized traffickers into highly coordinated insurgent-style forces capable of sustained warfare. The cartels don't hoard weapons for show. They use them as tools of war. Assault rifles and machine guns are deployed in ambushes and street battles to seize neighborhoods and break rival convoys. 50-caliber sniper rifles pick off vehicles and commanders from long range to disrupt leadership and logistics. And RPGs and belt-fed guns are used to smash checkpoints and breaching operations against fortified compounds. Weaponized drones perform reconnaissance, mark targets, and drop bomblets on rival groups or security forces. Armored monstruos carry assault teams into urban fights, and landmines and IEDs protect supply lines and channel opposing movements. Together, these tactics let cartels seize territory, protect shipments, eliminate rivals, and intimidate civilians and authorities, turning criminal disputes into sustained military-style campaigns. The Sinaloa cartel might. The 2019 Battle of Culiacan offered a chilling glimpse into the cartel's capacity for urban warfare when cornered. On October 17th, Mexican special forces launched an operation in the affluent Tres Rios district to apprehend Ovidio Guzman, son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The elite GAF unit breached the safe house swiftly, subduing guards and detaining Ovidio within minutes. On paper, it was a decisive blow aimed at weakening the Sinaloa cartel.
Will the Mexican army use the recent success to launch an all-out assault, or will the cartels rain down more terror?
But the operation spiraled into chaos. Encrypted communications triggered a rapid mobilization of cartel operatives. Within 30 minutes, over 700 armed sicarios flooded the streets, wielding 50-caliber machine guns, rocket-propelled grenades, and improvised armored vehicles. The assault was highly coordinated, executed with precision that mirrored military operations. Roadblocks of burning buses severed key routes as gunfire rained from elevated positions. Thick smoke blackened the skyline, while armored trucks rammed police vehicles and military checkpoints collapsed under concentrated fire. Civilians fled, streets emptied, and embedded lookouts fed real-time intelligence that allowed the cartel to outmaneuver government forces. By late afternoon, the Special Forces team holding Ovidio was encircled. The operation had collapsed, exposing a grim reality. The Sinaloa cartel had evolved into a paramilitary organization capable of large-scale urban combat. Intelligence later revealed that more than 150 vehicles were mobilized across multiple neighborhoods to overwhelm defenses. Facing mounting casualties, hostage threats, and the risk of civilian deaths, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador made a controversial choice. He ordered Ovidio's release. The cartel had seized soldiers, stormed military compounds, and issued deadly ultimatums, leaving the government little room to maneuver. Public outrage erupted as images of burning streets and terrified residents flooded social media. Internationally, the incident drew sharp criticism, especially from the United States, where officials viewed the release as a failure of Mexico's resolve against organized crime. DEA data from 2021 linked the Sinaloa cartel to 98% of fentanyl entering the U.S., intensifying calls for sanctions and joint security operations. The surrender exposed profound weaknesses in Mexico's security framework. Freeing Ovidio saved lives but set a dangerous precedent, showing how a single figure could bend national policy through violence. Alongside his brothers, known as Los Chapitos, Ovidio assumed control of the cartel after their father's extradition. He oversaw finance, logistics, and technology, managing millions through hidden accounts and couriers. Under his command, cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl moved efficiently across borders, cementing his role as a key architect of the organization. By 1929, at just 28, Ovidio had become a defining figure in the cartel's evolution. He fused modern technology with ruthless tactics, using encrypted phantom-secure phones and private radio networks to coordinate operations and jam military communications during the Culiacanazo. His digital systems tracked shipments and financial flows, transforming the cartel into a sophisticated, adaptive enterprise. Beyond technology, he built a disciplined fighting force. Recruits from Sinaloa's poorest communities were trained to handle advanced weaponry, forming organized units capable of coordinated assaults. Their rapid deployment in Culiacan showcased military precision rarely seen in criminal groups. Ovidio's financial network laundered profits through small businesses and cash transfers, masking the cartel's accurate scale. In many regions, his organization acted as employer and protector, filling voids left by an absent state. This local loyalty complicated intelligence efforts and strengthened his grip on power. It was not strange that Ovidio's rise drew U.S. attention, particularly for his role in trafficking fentanyl, a drug linked to over 80,000 overdose deaths in 2021. His command of resources, technology, and workforce elevated him to high-value target status. Capturing him would require coordination on a scale Mexico had never attempted. When President López Obrador took office in 2018, he championed a softer approach: hugs, not bullets. His programs, like Youth Building the Future, aim to address the roots of crime through education and employment. But the absence of sustained pressure created a vacuum that the Sinaloa cartel quickly filled. The events of October 17, 2019, laid bare the limits of that policy. Recognizing the sophistication of Ovidio's network, the United States pushed to prevent a repeat of Culiacan. On January 5, 2023, authorities captured Guzman Lopez in Culiacan's Jesus Maria district during Operation Mongoose Azteca. Months of intelligence sharing allowed precise tracking of his movements and communications. In a pre-dawn raid, helicopters and armored vehicles breached his residence. Within hours, Guzman Lopez was in custody. Defense Secretary Luis Crescencio Sandoval confirmed the operation, involving the Mexican Army, National Guard, and Navy. Ovidio was flown under heavy guard to the Altiplano Maximum Security Prison, the same facility that once held his father. 17 of his associates were also captured, marking one of the most significant blows to the Sinaloa network in years. At a press briefing, Foreign Secretary Marcelo Ebrard confirmed an existing U.S. extradition request while emphasizing pending Mexican charges. A federal judge ordered a 60-day preventive detention period as violence exploded across Sinaloa. Gunfire, burning vehicles, and roadblocks erupted in Culiacan, Los Mochis, and Guasave. The U.S. consulate in Hermosillo issued warnings, and airports across the region shut down after aircraft came under fire. By dawn, the toll was grim. 10 soldiers, 19 cartel gunmen, and 1 police officer dead. Nearly 3,600 troops were deployed, seizing Barrett rifles, machine guns, and armored vehicles. Days later, Washington responded. The U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control imposed sanctions under Executive Order 14059, freezing assets tied to Guzman Lopez's supply chain, including chemical suppliers for fentanyl and methamphetamine. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called it part of a broader effort to dismantle the global machinery behind America's opioid crisis. By late February 2023, the U.S. formally filed for Ovidio's extradition. 7 months later, he was transferred to the United States to face sweeping drug charges. On July 11, 2024, inside Chicago's Dirksen Federal Building, Ovidio Guzman Lopez pleaded guilty to multiple counts of drug trafficking and operating a criminal enterprise.
U.S. drug warriors say it's time to raise the cost to the drug cartels.
His sentencing remains sealed, as he reportedly cooperates with U.S. authorities, offering information in exchange for the one thing his family's empire could never buy: time. Meanwhile, political fallout shook both sides of the border. Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, accused Washington of reckless timing, blaming the arrests for reigniting cartel violence.
We can share information, but we will never accept the presence of the U.S. Army in our territory.
By early 2025, those fears began to take shape. Online chatter hinted at plots targeting U.S. personnel, and a January shootout near Frontera, Texas, involved suspected cartel scouts testing defenses. Intelligence reports pointed to CJNG under Nacio Eleno Ocera Cavantes, stockpiling RPGs, anti-aircraft systems, and weaponized drones. And yet, the large-scale retaliation the world braced for never came. The silence that followed was not peace, it was anticipation. Across North America, one question lingered like smoke on the horizon. When the cartels finally decide to strike, will anyone be ready? The brewing war. Through 2024 and into 2025, one mystery consumed intelligence circles across Washington. Why hadn't the cartels struck back? Despite relentless U.S. pressure, CIA-led raids, Treasury sanctions, extraditions, and targeted strikes under Trump's 2025 directive, the cartels remained silent. American air and naval operations had obliterated smuggling convoys in the Caribbean, unaliving dozens. Yet the massive retaliation experts predicted never came. Behind the silence lay calculation, not fear. For all their brutality, the cartels are businesses first. Their empire depends on the American market, billions flowing north each year. Any large-scale attack on U.S. soil risked a full military backlash that could destroy the system keeping them alive. Violence has limits. The old Sinaloa Code, "Don't poison the well you drink from," had long guided cartel strategy: avoid chaos that draws too much attention. For decades, that rule kept tourist zones and U.S. cities off-limits, ensuring profit outweighed pride. But Trump's hardline campaign was pushing those limits further than ever. The pressure was beginning to crack old rules. In early October 2025, a group tied to the Sinaloa network issued a direct threat, vowing to target American citizens and federal agents after U.S. seizures disrupted fentanyl shipments worth millions. Banners appeared in Culiacan carrying open threats against U.S. officials, calling recent American actions an act of war. The message spread fast, through encrypted channels, whispers, and social media. American tourists were warned to avoid cartel territories like Cancun, Tijuana, and Los Cabos. Restraint was fading. Then came intelligence that changed everything. Multiple agencies intercepted chatter suggesting the cartels had approved to engage U.S. forces directly, to open fire on Border Patrol agents if provoked. It marked a chilling shift from their long-standing doctrine of avoiding American targets. Yet even as tensions rose, the cartels held their fire. A masked operative speaking from deep within Sinaloa admitted that the new wave of U.S.-backed raids had changed everything. Operations were riskier, and for the first time in years, cartel members feared capture or assassination. Internal paranoia surged, triggering purges and forcing diversification into other rackets, most notably the brutal trade of avocado extortion to offset dwindling drug profits. Another commander confirmed that tightening border security was cutting into smuggling routes. What was once routine now demanded precision and higher costs. But adaptation had always been the cartel's greatest weapon. With the border sealed tighter and the seas under patrol, they shifted strategy at a price. Smuggling migrants now costs as much as $10,000 per person, up from $6,500 just months earlier. The risk had simply been passed to their customers. Recruitment also evolved. Cartel recruiters began exploiting social media to enlist young Americans as couriers, citizens able to cross the border unnoticed. It was a subtle, dangerous shift, turning ordinary people into unwitting players in a global narcotics empire. As the U.S. tightened its grip, the cartels found new leverage in Mexico's politics. They framed the American offensive as a violation of national sovereignty, casting themselves not as criminals but as defenders of Mexican pride. In regions where cartel money built schools and provided protection, that message found loyal believers. This narrative worried Mexican analysts more than the guns themselves. Former special operations officers warned that if the U.S. acted unilaterally, the cartels could rebrand as freedom fighters, rallying public sympathy and even drawing defectors from the military. A full-scale American incursion, they warned, could unite once fractured cartels under a single banner of resistance. At the same time, internal conflicts were buying the U.S. precious time. The Sinaloa organization was still locked in a civil war between the Chapitos and Mayos factions, draining manpower and delaying retaliation. But that balance was fragile. Recent intelligence suggested the Chapitos were forging an alliance with their former rivals in the CJNG. If true, it would mark the birth of a nightmare coalition, two of the most violent cartels joining forces across Mexico's northern corridors. Together, they would control major trafficking routes and key border crossings, and command a private army larger than those of several Latin American nations. Military simulations by RAND painted a grim picture of what might follow if the U.S. intervened directly. Ground operations could splinter the cartels further, unleashing chaos without stopping the drug flow. Worse, disruption of supply chains could drive traffickers to create even deadlier drugs, worsening the overdose crisis already gripping American cities. Critics like Senator Jack Reed warned that the administration's strategy risked creating another forever war, an open-ended campaign with no clear victory, no exit strategy, and no guarantee of success. The parallels to Afghanistan and Iraq were impossible to ignore. America could win every skirmish, yet still lose the larger war if the root causes, its demand for narcotics, Mexico's poverty, and deep corruption on both sides, remained untouched. Still, the Trump administration pressed on. By October 2025, officials hinted at the next phase: targeted drone strikes on CJNG laboratories in Michoacán.
The Trump administration is considering using drone strikes against the Mexican drug cartels.
If authorized, these would mark the first U.S. military operations on Mexican soil since the 1840s, a symbolic move almost guaranteed to ignite nationalist fury. The State Department raised its travel advisories, warning Americans to avoid cartel-dominated regions. Along the border, confrontations escalated, fewer smugglers fleeing, more standing their ground. "They're not scared anymore," one Border Patrol officer said. "They're fighting like they've got something to prove." The question now haunting Washington was whether the U.S. had crossed a line from which there was no return. In August 2024, the Treasury expanded sanctions to include entire cartel networks, notably Cartels Unidos, freezing assets and crippling front companies across North America. Officials pointed to a 20% increase in fentanyl seizures as proof of success. But analysts saw a darker truth. Despite record seizures, street prices for fentanyl barely moved, proof that the cartels were simply producing more, outpacing every U.S. crackdown as they had for decades. Former Sinaloa distributor Margarito J. Flores Jr. agreed that decisive action against the cartels was necessary, but cautioned that it could have dangerous side effects. He explained that fear and pressure wouldn't stop cartel members. Instead, it would make them more intelligent, aggressive, and violent, ultimately turning them into something even more dangerous. As U.S. and Mexican forces expanded joint raids and fortified positions across the Caribbean and border regions, the fight is no longer a covert drug war. That outcome would define U.S.-Mexico relations for generations. One truth was certain: America was now at war, openly and irrevocably. The only questions left were how much blood it would cost and whether it would make any difference at all. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.